Most watches you should take your time and consider, but then there are some that really don't need any consideration at all. These watches are just so good that time spent thinking is simply time not spent enjoying. They're few and far between, so I found 10 watches of all budgets I think fit the bill. The last one is definitely a watch on this list. It's not easy keeping up with all the Seiko acronyms, and the return of the SNXS isn't making it any easier. Perhaps you didn't know it was gone, or even existed at all. That's awkward, like saying "you too" when the waiter tells you to enjoy your meal, or accidentally kissing your father-in-law on the mouth. Aside from looking like the phonetic spelling of Schmiegel's treats,
delicious snacks is precious.
The SNXS returns as part of the Seiko 5 series as the entry-level option for budding watch buyers. That's Seiko 5 as in the entry-level sports watch in the Seiko collection, making this the entry-level watch in the entry-level series of the entry-level brand. I haven't been this confused since I accidentally kissed my father-in-law on the mouth. Here to clarify things is the SNXS's reference code, SPRK. Why is it not SNXS? Well, the SNXS was originally part of the SNX series, and the truth is, I don't know. I don't think Seiko knows either. I can tell you it was similar to the SNK series, so there is that. Unfortunately, the days of the $100 Seiko are as over as Amber Heard's housekeeping career. Seiko may have shit the bed on price, with the SNXS now clocking in at £340, but given that you need a mortgage to get all the streaming services these days, it's still one of the cheapest watches you'll find out there. It comes in 3 colour configurations, black, blue and beige, and all are set with an orange seconds hand and discoloured lume, a particular shade I like to call "I don't think you should eat that." It's inspired by the beauty of radioactive decay, and is one of the many signs that all of us here right now have something wrong with us. What's unbelievable about the SNXS is that it packs a fully fledged spec sheet for the price of a half tub of cinema candy, offering up the 4R36 automatic caliber with 41 hours of power reserve, 100 meters of water resistance, the date and day, and even hacking seconds. Sure, I've seen sundials rated more accurately than the 4R36, but in actual use, people have seen precision of just a few seconds per day. The 37.4mm case size may cause concern for some, but unless you're rocking wrists like Pringles cans, you'll simply be embracing the new norm in watches that aren't big enough to be seen from space. The watch is shod in a 3-link bracelet, and you can forget things like dive extensions and on-the-fly micro-adjust, because remember, it costs as much as a week's return ticket to Scunthorpe. Rival bargain watch wrangler Citizen has also been batting balls irresponsibly far, with its entry-level selection getting so jam-packed with options it's hard to decide in which direction to get in debt. Allow me to assist by suggesting the Tsuyosa, but not just any Tsuyosa. This one's the small seconds. At £399, it takes the already very successful Tsuyosa and adds, as I should think would be no surprise, small seconds. The uber-nerden here will know that a small seconds display is actually less complex than the standard watch's center seconds, and the absence of the date also reduces complexity. But given logic is as welcome here as R. Kelly in an orphanage, our puny human brains see this downgrade as, in fact, an upgrade. What's helping matters is, set into the dial, the gaping maw of a sandworm. It's not machine-turned guilloche, hand-inscribed by a wizened watchmaker with the same rose engine Noah used to make his Ark, but it does a very acceptable imitation, budget considered. What is that budget? Just £369 on leather and £399 on the bracelet, £100 more than the standard Tsuyosa. Dials come in grey, blue or beige, with a contrasting subdial and polished hands and markers. The overall specification is almost impossible to believe at this price, the 40mm case shrouded in sapphire crystal and containing the 60-hour power reserve caliber 8322A, sealed to 50 meters. Even the bracelet is impressive, a double deployant clasp at one end and quick release at the other. Put it all together and you get a watch that makes you well at risk of getting twatted over the head with a metal pole. It's the ultimate compliment, really, and it would be impolite not to say thank you. If you get knocked unconscious, you can always send a card from the hospital. If you're a dapper chap, or one of the 2.5% of chapettes joining me here too, then it's as sure as shampoo that you'll have considered a Cartier. It's the watch brand for people with umbrella stands, shoehorns and piercing eyes, and it's literally impossible to look like you've not got your shit together wearing one. If you ever get rejected for a mortgage, try applying again, but this time with a Cartier on. You'll not only secure the loan, you'll also get employed by the banker's CFO. Wearing a Cartier is like having people call you sir. It makes you better than everyone else. The cost of being better than everyone else, however, is quite high, since Cartier watches typically fetch in the 5 to 10k range and above. Just recently, the media was very interested in a whole bunch of famous people wearing silly outfits, but thankfully there were plenty of Cartiers there making the whole thing legit. But there's another way. Back in the 1970s, when Japan came along and shit in Switzerland's soup, Cartier had a strokey beard meeting about what to do with its watches. Was the luxury watch as dead as VHS? Or could it be reanimated into a bastardized combination of European luxury and Japanese tech? They went with the latter, called it the Must de Cartier, and it worked. Now, since Switzerland has long been back in business, quartz calibers seemingly have no place or home. They're the ugly stepchild, surviving on nothing but wall mushrooms and dirt down in the basement. When you think about it though, Cartier doesn't really like doing what anyone else does. If you started your own watch brand and wanted to bet against its success, you'd make them small, square and quartz, and maybe you'd even throw on some Roman numerals, just to finish it off. For Cartier, that's a recipe for success, and so the Must is back, in quartz, and with some pretty brandy colours too. Choose from jet black, emerald green or cherry red, or even something a bit more traditional with the classic Roman numerals. And because of the quartz caliber, the Must starts at just £3,150. Yeah, that's a lot of money for a quartz watch, but for a Cartier, they're basically giving them away. The tank case is beautiful, the jewelled cabochon elegant, the simple, colourful dials especially graceful. It's the sort of thing you'd expect to see on the wrists of the Monaco elite, but it's priced well enough for the cream of Milton Keynes too. This next choice is so obvious it's almost unfair. It's the blue shell of watchmaking, targeting unwitting brands who thought they could get away with a cheeky price jump with no one noticing. Nope, there's no hiding from Tudor, and they're back at it again with the black and burgundy Black Bay 58 GMT, basically all the watch you could ever need. Since there's no place in this conversation for such logical nonsense as need, we can at least acknowledge that this is a watch that's almost impossible to convince yourself out of purchasing. What clandestine concoction has Tudor come up with this time? Well, first it's undercut its bigger brother by pairing black and red in the famous Coca-Cola combination for its aluminium GMT bezel. Then it redesigned the original 58 style so it no longer looked like the logo was being rinsed down the plug hole. It even added the date for all those people incapable of remembering a single number for a whole day. But lastly, and most importantly, it added the caliber MT5450U, a movement so accurate they chronometer rated it twice, once with COSC and again with METAS. Why, you might ask? Well, it's always good to have a second opinion. This caliber is the icing on the cake because it brings the GMT down from the Pro's thickness of just a hair under 15mm to just 12.8mm, which means the only excuse left to not like it is having poor taste. Or not having the £3,770. That's a fair reason not to buy it, and I don't think Tudor takes kidneys. There's an extra few hundred to spend if you want the bracelet, which comes with the T-Fit adjustable clasp, but even so it really makes a mockery of everyone else. Omega's cheapest GMT watch right now, the Planet Ocean, starts at £7,900 and goes for over £8,000 on the bracelet. Tudor isn't just eating Omega's lunch, it's taking a dump in its ensuite and wiping its butt on the linen. What we're really talking about here is basically Rolex's game plan to ruin everyone else's day. As Rolex continues to rise in price and demand, it leaves a chasm behind it for everyone else to fight in, so rather than leave them to it, it lobbed in a Tudor-sized hand grenade and ran. Speaking of Rolex, the dastardly machinations don't stop there with Tudor, because at around £5,000, where the Black Bay chronograph starts to lose pace, that's bang on exactly where Rolex swipes up the price baton and runs like it's got rocket shoes. So think about Omega again. The cheapest Aquaterra that's not the size of a button costs £4,840, £5,130 on a bracelet. The 36mm Oyster Perpetual, that's £5,300. And since it's becoming more readily available, it's almost impossible to choose the Omega instead. Could it be true? Could Rolex be presenting as a value option? I don't know how this has happened, but Omega used to be the cut price alternative, and now here it is going toe to toe with the big dog like it's not going to get its skull crushed. This isn't David versus Goliath, it's David versus the Tsar Bomber. Every watch collector, including myself, goes through 3 phases with Rolex. Phase 1 is blind infatuation, because Rolex. Phase B is realizing it's a marketing company first and a watchmaker second. Phase Gamma is realizing how that shaped the entire industry as we know it, and that actually Rolex is the coolest one of all. This is the perfect watch for anyone at any phase. It's the perfect first Rolex, because it's the entry piece, an introduction to the oystery water resistance and perpetual rotariness that made the brand famous. For the second phase naysayers, it's the Rolex you have because every collection should have one, even if you don't care about them. And for the enlightened third phases, it's the most perfect iteration of Rolex, distilled into its purest form. For those who say 36mm is too small, it's not. It's just right. Yes, even for you. For those who say it's too mainstream, too popular, you'll see way less Oyster Perpetuals than you will most other Rolexes. And to you who damns Rolex as being a shiny brand for flash gits, well, you're right. I am a flash git, and you should be too. It's fun. Some of you may want to argue, but it's just no good. Succumb to the crown. Embrace the inevitable. Fight it no more. Rolex is the air the industry breathes and the water it drinks. Without Rolex, Geneva would just be a few huts and a muddy puddle. From the best known watch brand in the entire universe to one only a few squirrels in the German forest have heard of, this is the Dornbluth & Son, and you'll need less computing power than the shuttle to make the realization you need one. When you lay it out on paper, it all sounds a bit poo. The 99.1M is a hand-wound 40mm watch in steel with a $100 Unitas movement inside, and they're asking £5,000 for it. This is what's known in the trade as a gross underrepresentation. It's more of a disservice than describing mozzarella as lumpy cow juice. Dornbluth's 99.1M is a masterpiece of tradition, artistry and restraint, built with traditional machines and assembled by a small family of watchmakers. The raw caliber may start life as a Unitas, but by the time it's done, it makes Sandra Bullock's Miss Congeniality makeover look like a quick once-over with a wet wipe. It's easier to tell you what they leave alone rather than what they change. The springs. They leave the springs alone. That's about it. Everything else is either reshaped, refashioned, or outright replaced. Look at the jewel chatons, for example. They have no business being in anything this side of a Langer, and yet here they are for £5,000. Every detail is considered, and that makes it possible for every detail to be customizable. The standard dial is sterling silver, for example, but you can have ceramic if you want. The markers can be printed, applied, or even engraved and filled. Your wish is their command. They only make 10 or so watches a month, however, keeping the business small and personal. And when I say personal, I mean it. You don't just add to basket, you get to know them, spec your watch with them, and see it come to life step by step. They can document the whole process for you, and you're even welcome to come and visit. That's not the AD experience we're used to. Once upon a time, it used to be that the Snowflake was the default Grand Seiko to buy, but now that's changed. We've moved from winter into spring, and with the blooming of the cherry blossoms comes the rejected pastry that is the Shunbun. Japanese for really awesome watch, Shunbun brings light and magic to the mundane chore of telling the time. No longer is it time to take out the rubbish or time you got off your lazy behind and did something with your life. It's always Shunbun time. And that time can be spent answering a question as old as time itself. Is the dial actually pink? See, one of the biggest hesitations I hear about the Shunbun is the pinkness of the dial. The texture and light play is cooler than a cigarette-smoking Frenchman, but the colour? What kind of a pink is it really? Every picture looks different, capturing shades from old ham to fresh greys, and everything in between. Well, here's the thing. It's not really very pink at all. Sometimes it's a bit pink, but mostly it's a light silver with the merest hint of a touch of a thought of pink. Like, you know how when you go outside and it's really bright, and then you go back inside again and everything looks a bit blue, but it's not? It's like that, but pink or not. It's such a delicate shade that it looks like you could throw it in the bath to make it smell nice. And with the bezel-free 40mm titanium 62GS case and 9R65 smooth sweeping spring drive caliber, the rest of it's just as oddball. In a fun Willy Wonka way, not in a creepy uncle way. And if you have hesitations on the bracelet because you have a sensitive wrist that needs exactly the right fit, then have no fear, because this thing eats straps for breakfast, lunch and dinner. They call some watches strap monsters. This thing's about to go on a strap genocide. £6,200 is getting up there in price, but if you want a watch you're not sure is pink or not, that uses both springs and electricity, this is pretty much your only choice. Don't shun the bun. Welcome the bun. It's kind of weird how, since prices have been moving around, some watches that used to seem expensive now seem less so. Like the IWC Portugieser Chronograph, which was at one point the premium choice over something like a Daytona, and is now somehow almost half the price. Well, as my old home economics teacher used to say, that's how the philo flakes. And for us humble watch buyers, it's working to our advantage. If that advantage is that some stuff is now really expensive and other stuff is just still expensive. My glass is 1/3 full. Nevertheless, the steel 41mm Portugieser Chronograph remains as attractive a thing as it ever was. It's Henry Cavill, Jason Momoa and Chris Hemsworth all squashed into a disc about 1 centimetre thick and 4 across. Put Cary Grant on a rubber strap and you're getting close. What's the secret sauce to the Portugieser Chronograph's good looks? It all boils down to the basics of any designer's toolkit: shape, colour and proportion. It's a pretty simple watch, really, but every part is just so well balanced it could get the gig as Cirque du Soleil's tightrope walker. It goes right down to the details. It's not just how thick the numbers are, for example, but how tall as well, and how rounded and reflective. Every single minute marker looks as tempting to eat as the decorations on that kid's birthday cake I ruined. Sorry, son. About the only criticism that can be levelled at it is the nibbled numbers at 12 and 6. For me personally, I don't mind a dissected digit here and there, but I know for some it's a cardinal sin worse than farting under the covers and pulling them up over your partner's head. For everything else, I'm not sure how it's even possible to complain. Unless you're someone who likes complaining for complaining's sake. This water's too wet, this ice is too cold, that kind of thing. Otherwise, the subdials are not too big, not too small, not too far in, nor too far out. The hands are so smooth and shiny they look like they've been snapped straight off the gutters of an icy Swiss chalet. The colours too, they're not too pale and not too saturated. And now they've added a cool blue version in white gold too, it just becomes even harder to resist. The jump from £7,600 in steel to £17,500 in white gold certainly helps cool things off. I hope IWC doesn't do 0% finance over 50 years. Ever get deja vu? You're about to, because the next watch we're going to talk about, on paper, sounds like the kind of timepiece you should only touch to transport to the waste disposal. It's 42mm across, 13.6mm thick, houses the infamous Valjoux 7750 chronograph and costs $9,495. There's not been a bigger gulf between cost-based expectation and reality since the Rings of Power, at least on paper. On paper, the Royter DR-02 is an overpriced, oversized ogre of a watch. In reality, it's something else entirely. Much like the Unitas we saw earlier in the Dornbluth, this Valjoux gets a little bit of a makeover. But not only is the 7750 a more complex movement, containing more than twice as many parts, but that makeover is more hardcore as well. Less Sandra Bullock and more Ty Pennington. This work includes, but is not limited to, the hand beveling and polishing of the rotor, with the brand hand engraved as well, plus Geneva striping, rose gold plating of the bridges, with screw sinks beveled and polished, circular perlage on the base plate and straight graining on the levers, and black polishing on all the screws. Not only is this the work done, it's done by hand. This can be a bit of a grey area, because by hand can mean seating everything in a fully aligned custom jig and moving a lever back and forth, still requiring skill but with more speed and repeatability. That's great for bigger brands that can afford this setup, but for Dan Royter, in his New York-based workshop, he's got to make do with bits of stick and blue tack. That means basic tools he can hold in his hands to apply these finishes, and that means the consistency comes down to dexterity, muscle memory, and practice. Lots of practice. And there's no phoning it in for the rest of the watch either, with the same amount of work applied to the dial and hands, as well as the case, which all receive the same level of meticulous hand finishing, and are designed to wear as comfortably as you like. It begs the question, why do all this incredible work to such a basic movement? Well, here's the trouble for watchmakers like Dan. The R&D to create a movement like this from scratch is so impossibly expensive that it's just not feasible. And to be honest, it's not really the work of a watchmaker either. It's designed by a CAD engineer and manufactured by a CNC operator. The work we love, the hand jobs, is what's needed to finish. To be honest, $9,495 for the amount of hours poured into these watches is a bit of a scam. Not for you, for Dan. He used to charge less as he was building his customer base, and I have no doubt he'll be able to charge more in the future. He's earned every single penny of it. If only a highly esteemed watchmaker would make a watch with the same quality as the Royal Oak, with a similar integrated style, but only half the price. I've not seen this much optimism since the Treaty of Versailles prevented any further world wars. But wait, you cynical dog, because our prayers have been answered, and for quite some time now. Except no one's really paid any attention. This is the Chopard Alpine Eagle, and it's not only a rip-snorting alternative to Audemars Piguet's Royal Oak, but it's every bit as good and almost bang-on half price at £13,300. And get this, Chopard has been making high-quality watches for 21 more years than Audemars Piguet. It's made thinner watches than Audemars Piguet too, showing it a clean pair of heels in many of watchmaking's most challenging disciplines. I know it'll always be the "you couldn't get a Royal Oak" version of the Royal Oak, but if you can get your head around that, then you'll be left with a watch that's absolutely astounding for the price. It's like having a supermodel girlfriend with a hairy face. I'm sure you could put up with it given that everything else is amazing, and because you have no business with being with any kind of supermodel anyway. Speaking of hairy faces, the Chopard style is rich with texture, evoking the not entirely unfriendly image of a ball of wool. There are other images it conjures, but I think we've had enough butt jokes for one video already. Unseeability aside, everything else is extremely well executed, from the immaculate dial to the 41mm steel case and twin-pin seamless link bracelet to the automatic 60-hour caliber 0101C. I'm honestly having a very hard time not buying one, and not because of any of the stuff I've just told you, but because Dreamboat Shunbun wears one as Captain Ri in hit K-drama Crash Landing on You. Sigh. Those are the watches I think need little brain power to actually go out and buy, but what about you? Tell me your recommendations in the comments below. A big thanks as always goes to my incredible Patreon supporters, without whom I couldn't do this. You can join them via the link in the description. And if you're looking for a job, start your own business so you can write yourself a great reference. Works like a charm. See you next time.